We'll begin this tour of Prairie Trail development in Ankeny with the location of this 1,000 acres in Ankeny, just north of the Des Moines Metro. This is a master plan look at what the site looks like, and we'll be flying over it in a minute to take a closer look at it. You also can see the area where it fits in within the relativeness of the city and how large the site is, including the John Deere and Des Moines Area Community College. We'll be taking a look at this area right here in Ankeny. And there's also some before pictures of what this development looked like before it was done. The stream corridor, some of the down cutting, and some of the issues that were really being shown in the watershed even before a development took place in this area. And that's one of the reasons why we're talking about Prairie Trail today, because it's really the gold standard for stormwater management in central Iowa, as well as some of the design aspects. So a little bit of history of the site and why this large tract of land was here is because it was the Des Moines Ordnance Plant site, which was over 2,200 acres. And in World War II, it was used for munitions manufacturing and testing. 19,000 people worked at the site and produced like 2,000 rounds of ammunition a day for the war effort. But after the war, Deere and Company bought the part in the Northwest I showed you that has been operating as John Deere since 1947. And in Iowa State University bought 1,031 acres in 1947 for a dairy research center and plant science studies. So Des Moines Area Community College purchased the southeast corner of the site in the 1970s for an Ankeny campus, college campus. Well, Iowa State University sold the farm to buy one closer to Ames after a 2003 legislative change allowed that kind of action to take place. And the city was able, of Ankeny, was able to acquire the 1,031 acres of land from ISU. They'd long had an interest in the farm for residential and business because how it could spur economic development and really round their town out between Ankeny and growing to the south towards the Des Moines Metro. Ankeny utilized a really unique public-private partnership to create the Prairie Trail development. And in July of 2005, Ankeny named DRA Property as the master developer for Prairie Trail. They collaborated with both local and nationwide firms on a team with expertise in stormwater management and many other things necessary to pull off this type of development. A year of professional planning, collaboration, and different charrettes for input from the public and key members in the area helped determine the key features and desires for this large site. Some of the things that they were really interested in were a sense of community, a destination place, utilizing great architecture, walkability, being family-centered, and having something for all generations and attracting young people. So they utilized some new urbanism and conservation design principles, created a town center with different civic and cultural elements, including library, retail, entertainment, schools, police station, and even a $25 million civic fund that was created in order to pull some of all these other things in place. So really what we're looking at, and what you can see here, even with this stormwater wetland, is we are managing stormwater while creating these amenities. This included talking about stormwater at the beginning of the process, not cramming it in the leftover spaces really at the end of the whole process, and identifying these dedicated open spaces that manage stormwater and really developing around them, which was a unique process for Iowa at the time and for even looking at stormwater with this nature. And because of that, they were able to create over 13 miles of trail and 200 acres of park, many of which manage stormwater. So we're beginning to look here at the north side of the DMAC campus, and they actually also, back in this same time frame, spent about $500,000 in improvements to this stream corridor and many other stormwater features on their site. So as we turn back around, you can see a school that's getting built currently on this particular site. And we're about to head back north and take a look back through the site and see how this stormwater treatment train comes through. So the design process that was used, called the Unified Sizing Criteria, is used to manage stormwater with engineering techniques that help protect our streams, rivers, and lakes. And this approach really mimics how Iowa's native prairie landscape and soils were able to soak in rainfall back before we created all this urban development and the impervious surfaces that it brings with it, so that they can treat stormwater as a resource rather than a waste product to really maintain and improve water quality. And the interesting thing was all this was really designed before the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual, the guidance document for stormwater in Iowa, was written. So at the time I was providing the local engineers with what we were working to put in the manual as I was part of the manual process to Nilles Associates. So now as we look back to the north, you can see this areas where the stormwater management is happening in this green space that will create these lovely green spaces with water features all down through the site as the water works its way through. This particular site is built on a couple different 500-acre watersheds. And that being such allows for the drainage through the site. So as we turn back around and look at this large area, this is a chain of lakes that was built earlier than the work you're seeing now. This is Vintage Lake here, and this is part of the treatment train that flows down in. You can see across the road that some of the commercial district, there's permeable pavers back in this area that allow that water to infiltrate in the ground before moving to the lakes to allow for cleansing. They also created permeable pavers along the streets here so that the parking areas can allow water to infiltrate into it. And this particular restaurant and the parking lot that it goes to, part of it's piped underground to a storm system and part of it runs across the surface down to this edge of the parking lot here that has permeable pavers that allows the water to infiltrate in before it flows out into Promenade Lake that we're going by here. So, this is a really key feature of the treatment train approach to making stormwater work hard to get off the landscape as it flows through these different pond systems and out a unique outlet structure that we're going to look at. So it's on both the upper lake, Vintage Lake, and this lower lake, Promenade Lake, and the park surrounding it. But here there is the outlet structure that allows the different storm events, from the small water quality events all the way to the large events, to be able to exit the structure while providing the proper timing so that we don't provide downstream degradation of the stream channel like you could see before based on that water gushing right out of here. And previously, those small rain events would have flowed right on through and not been managed at all. So this was not required. This was something that was done prior to any requirement to do this type of design. And we're really just starting to have the metro communities look at ordinances that will help do design this way, which is why it's so important to take a look that it can be done, and it was done a long time ago and it's working very well. This is Sailor Creek, and downstream this creek was also stabilized so that it would not continue down cutting. And we're going to take a look as soon as we turn back around, back up through the landscape, and then we're going to take a look on the ground at some of these sites that we've been looking at as we fly around aerially to see them. So, one of the things that you'll be able to see here is there's a trail, and there's another smaller pond that doesn't have 500 acres coming to it. And that pond also has an outlet structure in it that allows it to manage stormwater in a different way without utilizing, the really large concrete structure that we've seen here. So here's the pond there that is, managing stormwater with all the different storm events using the unified sizing criteria. Here's a good look at that outlet structure. This is the water quality coming over, and then as you move up here, it gets larger and larger storms that are allowed to flow out. We'll take a quick look at that from the ground later in the slideshow so you can kind of really get to see what that looks like. It can be done with other methods. Also note that this Promenade Park right here is, is turf grass with a very small buffer. And as we go up further, Vintage Lake, which is north of here, has natives planted all around it. And you can see a remarked difference in the amount of geese on this lower lake than on the upper lake, which also provides different water quality benefits by not having so many geese there. And the reason that they like this lake more is because they can see that there aren't coyotes ready to eat them, which they can't tell necessarily in a lake with the native vegetation. So not only does that native vegetation provide something blooming all the time, habitat for butterflies and songbirds, and a really interesting aesthetic, it also does limit the number of geese that want to, be on there because they can't tell what's in here. Here's that outlet structure for Vintage Pond, like we mentioned, and here's a stormwater wetland. There's bioretention cell here taking street water. So water's working down through this landscape very slowly and being cleansed the whole time, as opposed to being shot straight through a basic maybe detention pond that doesn't do anything for the small rain events. So this is much more like what Iowa was once and what the unified sizing criteria is. So now we're taking a look on the ground during a rain event of some water flowing off the street into a curb cut into a bioretention cell, which uses vegetation and engineered soils below that have a high sand content to treat that water as it flows through this structure and then downstream and out. So this is a great way to begin to manage other things. I showed you this site from the air. These are the permeable pavers that allow the water to go between the joints. There's many different styles. This one doesn't have a filling in the joints, and the water's flowing right off this parking lot into these pavers through a rock chamber, settles, cools, cleansed before it gets into the lake. Much cleaner, because you can imagine the car droppings and trash that accumulate on here that otherwise would flow directly into the lake as a pollutant. Here is a stormwater wetland that we saw from above. You remember these houses and the trail that goes through these natives. Here's Vintage Lake from the top, the outlet structure, bioretention area, just really making that water work hard to get off the landscape and providing this wonderful open space that people that aren't in tune might not realize this is a stormwater management facility. It doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't have to be degraded. Here is the outlet structure right before we got hit by that big rainstorm you saw, different levels for that water to come on through as it moves forward. So, that is why we wanted to take a look at prairie trail development to see that development can really happen in a different way that can provide water quality benefit with social benefit and open space development.
Hello, everyone. Next on our tour, we're going to be talking about wetlands of different sorts installed across the Des Moines Metro. Here, we're actually in the heart of Clive, right in the middle of the Des Moines Metro in central Iowa, looking at the Walnut Creek Greenbelt. And for us, this is really an important area because as we looked at retrofitting older communities with stormwater management, for years we spent a lot of time doing homeowner scale projects and street projects, really large numbers of smaller stormwater management projects. But as we started looking and working with communities like Clive, who had done a lot of work to purchase greenbelt space and natural public park open space, we really started looking at, are there ways we can do end of pipe stormwater treatment? So in this case, there's many communities that drain right into the greenbelt, these natural wooded areas. You can see the bike trail down there. There's some open grassy areas. And so our work began about 10 years ago to look at, could we incorporate wetlands as an end of pipe treatment in areas like this in Clive? But it is important to note that when it comes to green space and treating stormwater, not all areas are created equal. When you have beautiful trees like we have here, that's a major consideration, both cost-wise, community perception-wise, and not wanting to really degrade the environment for stormwater management. So oftentimes we do target those open green grass spaces, kind of like you see on the left there as we pan around. But really that simple goal of, here we have residential, as we pan over here, see some commercial. A lot of those areas were built before stormwater regulations or requirements in Iowa. Could we come back into these areas and target them and really utilize green space for stormwater management? And one of these main tools when we talk about wetlands are constructed stormwater wetlands. And the first one we're going to go to here is actually at Easter Lake on the south side of Des Moines, where you saw we actually had a lake restoration project that looked at improving that lake. And as a part of it, we wanted to treat some of the stormwater that was coming into the lake. So here was one of our first stormwater wetlands that we installed in the metro. And previous to this wetland being installed, all the water from about a 30-acre residential neighborhood drained directly into the lake. And that neighborhood did predate a lot of our stormwater regulations, so it was mainly, especially the water quality portion, was untreated. So we utilized this wetland to intercept that water and really clean it and slow it down before it gets to the lake. And as we pan across the wetland here, you can imagine the force of that water that used to come right out of a pipe now has to go into a sediment forebay, has to flow into this wetland around a series of meanders with a much longer flow length before eventually hitting the berm and outlet structure that releases the water into the lake. And we'll jump across the metro back to Clive actually here, where they installed a wetland just last year. You can see the vegetation is just getting established. And this wetland just had a large storm the night before and is still holding a lot of that water with its 24 to 48 hour drawdown period. So a lot of those meanders are currently underneath that pool. And as we continue our tour across the metro, we're actually going to walk through another wetland. This one installed in the city of Ankeny. In 2019, the fourth fastest growing community in the nation. With a lot of rapid urban development, the city has taken a lot of steps to try and slow that water down to, in this case, drain into 4 Mile Creek, which will be the next stop of our tour. This in the uplands of the 4 Mile Creek watershed. This was a similar scenario where we had around 30 acres of drainage dumping right into the creek. And this wetland was installed as part of, during the road reconstruction, they saw an opportunity to put this wetland in as well. So again, you can see the riprap there on the left. That is the location of the forebay, which is where the sediment that may be coming into the wetland is captured for an easy clean out location. And then that water flows over that initial riprap structure into the wetland, into the shallow water habitat where we have a lot of what we call microtopography, where there's varying depths in that shallow region before flowing around the last bend and eventually getting to the deep water area, where if you look closely, interesting enough when we're out here getting video, some kids out there fishing, although many times not designed for fish, fish oftentimes get into this deep water habitats and just kind of add to the benefit of the stormwater wetlands. And there, as we pan back, you can kind of get the full view of the idea of trying to slow the water down around all those bends before getting to the creek. And the last spot we're going to look at here is actually going down the concrete ramp, and this is where equipment comes in to clean out the forebay. And while we're out here, we just thought it was cool to see all of this habitat, animal tracks going into the wetland here right in the middle of a large urban city. We have this nice little wetland providing a lot of habitat. Next, we'll go to our next type of wetland, and this would be an oxbow restoration. And here you can see kind of a before and after. You can see the remnants of that old stream channel that functioned as a wetland for many years before getting filled in. And we really worked to come in and dig out that sediments. And again, bringing us back to Clive, when we started looking for these sites, interesting enough, we looked at the Walnut Creek Greenbelt Plan, and we found a section that was literally named the oxbows because of identified old oxbows that had been disconnected through stream channelization. And here is a restored oxbow that we came in and dug out. And interesting enough, we were able to do a similar to the stormwater wetland when there was a nearby storm sewer that is now outletted into this wetland. So this narrow U-shaped oxbow previously during certain times of the year may have had up to 6 inches of water, but many times would dry out. Now provides a permanent pool and provides both fish habitats, water quality improvements, and some level of flood storage. Interesting enough, these are also done on the ag landscape, and when treating tile outlets can also serve as a great nitrate reduction practice. The last oxbow we're going to visit here actually was installed at the same time as we did some in Clive. This is in the city of Urbandale. And more than just the classic U-shaped oxbow, this one actually has a series of meanders from when it was disconnected from the stream, when the stream was straightened during a channelization project many years ago. So we came in, and the city of Clive, we worked with them to, or the city of Urbandale, and worked with them to dig out the oxbow here, and actually also serves as a water hazard as part of a disc golf course. And here, as the last kind of key point of our oxbow, is we do have a stream connection. So in this case, We dig out this channel here where Walnut Creek, when it gets about mid-bank height, so it takes about 6 feet for it to get out of its banks. When it's about 3 or 4 foot up, it'll actually back into these oxbows, providing a regular stream connection, both for fish and to alleviate and let it fill some of the water into the oxbow. And here, kind of a classic picture we'll end with a nice U-shaped oxbow in Clive.
So today we are looking at a stormwater wetland, which is part of this Grays Station development site, which is south of the downtown area of Des Moines, located between Martin Luther King Parkway and Raccoon River. So this system catches water from over 380 acres. Previously, there were 2 dry detention basins and 1 wet detention basin serving this area for flood protection. But now, here you can see the dry detention, the water came into the system and went directly to a pump house and directly into the river, Raccoon River. We have now incorporated the stormwater wetland by introducing a forebay at the entrance so that we can capture sediment, and incorporating berms and depressional areas throughout the wetlands. So we're making that water work its way through a longer flow path. Before, it would only travel less than a couple hundred feet, but now it travels almost 4,000 feet through that wetland system, these pools, and through that native vegetation, wetland species that are in the wetland to help treat the water before it is pumped out into the river. So the stormwater wetland is part of this Grays Station, which provides residential as well as commercial and retail opportunities to bring folks to this area. The 3 basin areas were owned by the city, the Hubble Realty Company, as well as the Des Moines Area Regional Transit Authority. So those 3 formed a public-private partnership and came together to retrofit those 3 basin areas into this stormwater wetland system. Not only does this stormwater wetland increase the flow path and help improve water quality and manage the storm events, it also provides this trail and recreational type system for the residents and visitors to the area, as well as educational opportunities for groups and schools to the area. This bridge was incorporated as part of the project as well across the river to provide some connectivity to Grays Lake, which lies on the south side of the river. And so it provides the connectivity to residents and visitors to the area. And like I said before, the wetland not only provides water quality improvements, but it also improves the aesthetics and the educational recreational value to the area.
Well, is there a way that we can make something here that's more attractive, that serves the engineering function that we want, but would be more of an asset to the community than something that maybe is something we want to keep people away from? One of the things that used to be here was a large stormwater detention basin. It was built, I think, a decade or 2 ago when they started building Martin Luther King Parkway and started doing some of the redevelopment here on the southwest side of downtown. But it wasn't the nicest thing really to look at. It had chain link fence around it. It had a big concrete path in the bottom that the water would flow out, making something that's more natural, that's better to look at, but also improves water quality.
Yeah, so we designed a trail system from the corner of MLK and Southwest 11th down through the site, all the way down to the basin, and then along the basin all the way up to the levee. And then as a part of that, we did the bridge that goes across the river as part of that. It's a really neat thing to connect Grays Lake to downtown with that trail system. So that's been a really neat aspect of the project.
So there will be all sorts of native wetland plants and biological functions then that clean that water, that filter it as it goes through the path through the wetland. So not only will it be cleaner like within the wetland itself, but it'll be much cleaner by the time it goes all the way through the wetland and gets out into the river. It's interesting to build a project of this scale in such an urban environment. I mean, we're just right next to downtown Des Moines. We're right along the Raccoon River here. And the wetland area is about 8 or 9 acres. So it's a very, very large area. As we mentioned earlier, 3/4 of a mile path that the water has to flow through here.
There's quite a bit of construction activity that's going on right now. The new Link apartments are really coming along, and it's going to be quite a neat development when it's all complete.
So these stormwater wetlands, as we design and help implement these in cities, can be used not only to treat water quality, but we can also incorporate what we call multi-stage outlets, like we have at the pump house station here, where we can actually control the flow out and the release rates of the water leaving the site. So we can not only manage those high flood type events, the 100-year storms, but we can manage all of those smaller rain events as well to help us capture the first flush and the pollutants that carry off in those smaller rain events. So we pan over the old industrial site, which is south of Martin Luther King. You can see the Gray Station development taking place here. And this whole area will continue to develop like the background, the downtown area of Des Moines. So these shallow water areas in the wetland that you see in the flow paths were planted with over 160,000 wetland species plugs, and those will help remove nutrients and pollutants as the water traverses through this longer flow path. You can also see some of the open water, deeper water areas, which will also help us remove a little more of the suspended sediments, help us reduce temperatures and provide additional habitat. And again, that berm that creates down the middle, that creates that longer flow path, will be able to be used as a soft walking path in conjunction with the trails, but also gives us an opportunity as a maintenance path to get equipment. The city will be able to access the wetland to do any kind of maintenance work by utilizing those berms and sites. And here you can see some of those plugs as they are starting to grow in the wetland system itself, and the berm as it goes down the middle. So these stormwater wetland systems can help us treat water quality. They can help us regulate and manage various storm events, and it provides an additional recreational, leisure, open space for residents and visitors to enjoy, and provides an educational opportunity for us to use in this part of the city.
This whole area here will be returned back to a natural state. Let the floodplain be the floodplain. Let the water go where it wants to go. The creek will come up, the creek will go down, and everyone will go on with their life without having their neighborhood impacted, because this part of the neighborhood won't be here anymore.
So tell me a little bit again about the history of buyouts in the Des Moines area.
The first buyout in modern history in Des Moines was a product of the Great Midwestern Flood of 1993. And like a lot of communities, saw a lot of rain and a lot of water. And the first round of buyouts was a hazard mitigation grant program undertaking in the aftermath of the 1993 flood. There were repeats in 1998, in 2008, and 2010. And as the acquisitions picked up steam over the intervening years, we started bringing in more funding sources to further along the project and accelerate it. The most recent experience was a flash flood that did quite a bit of damage all over the entire city, but particularly hammered this neighborhood again. And we stepped in with entirely local funding sources to accelerate the buyouts even more, to be able to step in and acquire that home while it was still damaged. So it would have required a substantial investment from the property owner just to be able to move back in for a year or 2 or 3 while waiting for the city to come along with federal resources to be able to acquire the home through the normal hazard mitigation program funding. And it made sense to us and to our elected officials to step in now with local dollars to put together a funding package that would greatly accelerate the acquisition of homes in this area and elsewhere in our
according to our state hazard mitigation plan, we see buyouts as a priority area. We want to make sure that we're moving citizens out of harm's way so that the next disaster they're not impacted again, which is so catastrophic for them.
Hello again, everyone. It was great to kind of hear the perspective of the city of Des Moines, who's been doing a lot of buyouts along Lower 4 Mile Creek. Actually, in total, nearing 300 buyouts over the last decade. But as we actually get down and look at the stream, what you see here is the stream during low summer flows. It's kind of hard to imagine, but this does turn into what can be a raging river in a quick amount of time. A lot of flashiness to this stream, and a lot of erosions happen down in the lower greenway. And here you see off to the left, along one of our many bike trails, although it looks rather vegetated right now from low flows in the summer, we've actually lost about 7 feet off this bank over the last 2 years, and currently sits about 5 feet from that bike trail. So this is actually the site of one of our upcoming stream stabilizations, which, as we really looked at how we're going to manage this land once these houses are out, stream restorations have been a major part of that conversation. And really dealing with flashiness has been an interesting thought that we've had to work through, because the stream comes up and goes down so quickly, and erosion is really a quick result of that flashiness. And as we pan, we're actually going to get a little bit more aerial of a view where we actually have some positive graffiti. You can see that respect the earth. It's interesting enough, there's a lot of positive graffiti goes on down here, but we also have a lot of other activities that you can imagine when you have houses that have been removed. And as we pan around here, you can imagine just a couple years ago, this was a neighborhood right along 4 Mile Creek in the floodplain. So as we've really started looking at restoring this area, one of the first things we're doing is looking at road removals, because when you have roads in largely unvisited areas, you do get a lot of activities you don't want happening. So here we've been looking at, let's remove those roads. In some cases, we're actually going to be turning them into bike trails, so they can still be used by people, but in a more appropriate way. And also looking at vegetation restoration. So all these areas, many of them had houses removed in the past year. We've let those areas grow up as we've put together a plan to prioritize areas for all these grassland areas to be restored to native prairie. And then you can see that very thick tree line. We do have a lot of invasive species in those timbers, specifically honeysuckle is a major one. So we are putting together a plan to also open up that canopy and remove a lot of that invasive brush. And here you can see another interesting project installed over this past winter, stormwater wetland. Just like we showed in that last tour, we have opportunities to install stormwater wetlands. So here you can see really that flow path of that wetland. And again, you have houses out, could we utilize this space to improve water quality? So this is actually the first of 3 stormwater wetlands that are being installed in the lower 4 Mile Greenway. And so a lot of what you're seeing here is the hydroseeding that was done in the fall. It's holding that soil before that vegetation really got growing this spring. And what previously was a storm sewer outlet that dumped right into the creek was pulled back and had this wetland installed to intercept that water. Oxbow restorations have also been a part of the greenway. This is actually the same oxbow that we got a glimpse of last go around. This time you see there's a lot less water in it, and that's because you do see some change in elevation in that oxbow based on stream depths. It's very connected via groundwater, and that's one of the reasons we've actually seen fish in these oxbows. Although they're generally only maybe thigh deep, on average 2 to 3 foot deep, we do have fish living in them. And in one case we tested and found up to 23 species living in one oxbow. And a lot of that's because of, with its groundwater connection, it has a constant source of oxygen, pumping oxygen into that oxbow, so fish can survive in low water in midsummer like we see here, and even over the winter. Another interesting story of partnerships. This area is managed by Polk County Conservation Board, although it's in the heart of the city of Des Moines. And in creating this oxbow, we actually utilized a partnership where the City of Des Moines Public Works staff actually dug out this oxbow for us. They have those excavators, and we worked. It was actually designed by the Natural Resources Conservation Service, a federal agency, and then The city of Des Moines staff built it. They dug it out and removed that sediment that had been deposited, and now the County Conservation Board is taking over the maintenance and restoration of the vegetation around the oxbow. And I would say this is the first of 4 oxbows that are currently planned for the Lower Greenway, 3 of them being installed as we sit today. You can also see the bike trail in the background there. If you look closer, you can actually see our drone pilot there. But these trails do provide a great opportunity for educational signage. So whenever possible, we do put signage on the trail so people can really see what they're looking at. And this one has provided quite a stark difference for trail users. Many of them used to the massive amounts of mosquitoes that used to live in this oxbow that only held water occasionally, but now with being full of fish, frogs, and other amphibians, we've really actually seen a reduction in the mosquito populations because of the habitat for all those predators. And lastly, we're actually going to look at a stream restoration project. So what we see here was actually previously massive amounts of erosion, even worse than that where we started with that erosion along the trail. But what we used here was using guidelines from the Iowa River Restoration Toolbox, we were able to do a large-scale restoration of this stream. And starting with this riffle we see here was actually a man-made riffle, really focused on reducing some of the power of that stream and stabilizing some of the down cutting. And as we flow upstream, you can see there those little jetties are actually Benway weirs aimed at pointing the stream force off the banks. And all these banks were graded, and you can see the riprap that was used as tow protection to really, in a natural manner, the end product is a stable stream that doesn't look like it's been piled with riprap. We use those natural processes to stabilize it. And as we pan left here, you're going to start seeing an area that's actually been restored to native prairie. And you can kind of start to envision those areas where all the houses have been removed. As that area gets restored to prairie, that's going to be kind of the goal of the entire 700-acre park when we're all said and done. And there you can kind of see that prairie bike trail running through it, houses safely out of the floodplain, but houses that previously were in the floodplain have been taken out. And you never know what you're going to see when you're out taking footage. So here, we're actually happy to meet a local resident that said he loves to go walk along the stabilization project. His dogs love to come swim in the stream. So it's really been interesting as you stabilize streams and get easier access down to the water. Simply the amount of people that go and play and enjoy the stream, like our dogs are here, that were quite interested in our drone. But it's really been quite pleasant to see people that never played in the stream before. They say, hey, I can actually get down and enjoy this stream, take my kids down there. And even with natural playscapes like we see there on the left, natural prairie around it, really, at the end of the day, trying to have a natural floodplain that people can still use, but without houses in danger and without people in danger. Trail users, park users, but all safe.